reply to everybody, that you reply to every customer in every channel every time. That's the hug your haters approach. Every customer, every channel, every time.
This is Marketing Mixtape. And now this is your host, the Professor, Scott Davis.
Jay, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to talk to me and my students and the people who follow me on LinkedIn. I'm super excited to have you and just want to start by saying thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much, Steve. Delighted to be here. Don't thank me before I do anything. That's probably too early to be thanking me, but great to be here and welcome to the students as well.
That's funny. Well, I feel like I know you better than I actually do just because you're so present in the world where I work, trying to learn more about digital marketing and social media and different strategies. And I'm trying to step out from the academic world and learn what actually works, which is one of the reasons I'm so thrilled to have you here. So could you spend just a couple minutes telling us how you got to where you are today? Because I consider you one of the pioneers in this space of online marketing and online word of mouth.
Well, I appreciate that. That just means that I'm old, but thank you for saying it so diplomatically. I have been doing this for a long time. I started in online marketing in 1993, which is about as early as you could have been in that business. So early that when I started in this business, domain names were free. You just get whatever domain name you wanted and didn't even have to give anybody any money, because who would want such a thing? It had no actual value. And my partners and I, in my very first internet company, circa 1993, sold Budweiser.com to Anheuser-Busch Brewing for 50 cases of beer. That is a true story. So things have changed a lot since then. And I have had a series of consulting firms and advisory firms in the 25 years since. My current firm is called Convince and Convert. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary here this summer. And we work with many of the world's most interesting brands to make sure that their content marketing, social media marketing, email marketing, and overall digital activities are as good as they possibly be to help these big brands like the United Nations and SAP and Oracle and Hilton and the Grand Ole Opry keep them out in front of customer expectations. Because the one thing that's really true is that customer expectations continue to ratchet up and up and up. And so the strategy that you employed in 2015 that you thought was amazing is no longer good enough. And so that's what our firm does is help with that. We also have a big network of podcasts and blogs and webinars and emails, and I write lots of books and give lots of speeches as well.
Awesome. I think this might be one of the longest series of show notes that I'm going to have, but I'm going to try to link to all your stuff and how everyone can find you there. So in terms of customer expectations and how they're always on the rise, is that a product of marketers just having a better understanding of how to reach customers, or is it this personalization movement? What's driving the expectations up?
I'm not sure actually what drives the expectations, other than the fact that today consumers don't give you a pass based on circumstance or vertical. And what we like to say is that customer expectations now are liquid. They slosh over from one category of business to another. So it wasn't that long ago that customers would say, well, that's pretty good for a hospital, or that's pretty good for a university, or that's pretty good for a B2B manufacturing company. And they don't do that anymore. They hold you to a standard that they're holding other companies to. And so what that means is that you're not really competing against whatever else is in your true competitive set for customer expectation and customer experience excellence. You're really competing against the best companies in the world. Zappos and Amazon and Ritz-Carlton and Uber and all these other folks are sort of setting the bar. And people are saying, well, I don't care that you make ball bearings. Why can't you be open 24 hours a day? Customers just don't give you that pass anymore. And that creates a lot of pressure for everybody to deliver faster, deliver better, to deliver more personalized experiences, et cetera.
That's really interesting. It's kind of a fascinating perspective. And I tend to look at things kind of industry to industry. So I love that you brought that into it. And I'm thinking about, so how would you do this if you're a small business and you're being measured against the Zappos standard? How can you even hope to survive?
Well, you may not be able to match them feature for feature, right? Zappos has free both way shipping. Well, maybe you can't afford that, but you need to understand that. You need to understand what their customer experience advantages are, and then you have to come up with your own. You have to come up with your own thing that maybe they can't match. So I'll give you an example. There's a story in my most recent book, Hug Your Haters, and it's also sort of reprised in my new book, Talk Triggers, which will be out this fall. And it's about an oral surgeon in New Jersey called Dr. Glenn Gorab is his actual name. There's a different name for the business, of course. But so Glenn does this extraordinary thing. There are, I don't even know, probably, hundreds of oral surgeons in the tri-state region. And he is among the best, if not the best, certainly the busiest, because he understands customer experience in a very interesting way. So what he does is that every Friday, his staff members give him a little sheet of paper with names and phone numbers on it. Every Saturday, he calls each of these people, and they are new patients who are coming into the office for the very first time the next week. And he calls them on a Saturday and says, "Hi, I'm Glenn. I'm the oral surgeon. I understand you're coming in for the first time next week. Do you have any questions?" And it blows people's minds, because you have probably been called by an oral surgeon post-procedure, right? They call you the night after or the night of your wisdom teeth extraction, whatever, like, "Hey, you doing okay? How's the pain? Are you bleeding to death? Like, what's up?" That's fairly commonplace, right? Nobody ever calls you before you've ever walked in the office, ever, right? And people cannot believe it. So routinely, he gets new patients come into the office who say, "I drove 12 miles out of my way to come visit you because you're the doctor who called my friend Maud before she ever came to the office." Like, it is his customer experience advantage. So when you're going up against a larger business like a Zappos or any kind of excellent organization, you don't necessarily have to fight fire with fire. You got to find your own fire.
I love that story, and I think it's because I'm a marketer, but I kind of got goosebumps when you talked about the Saturday call, because it's so rare, right? And we all have our own experiences
Can't believe it.
in healthcare, and you might get some kind of online training or preparation for what you're going to go through, but to have that personal interaction with the surgeon it's kind of unheard of, right? Which
so you can compete on. Look at Zappos competes on selection, right? But Glenn competes on empathy, right? That is his competitive advantage. So you definitely can and should have a competitive advantage. It's just that one thing that we fall into, especially in marketing, is this idea of follow the leader. Like, well, let's see who's doing it well, and let's try to do a pale imitation of that.
Right.
That doesn't usually work, right? If you're going to play follow the leader, it's almost impossible for you to be any better than second best. And what I tell my clients all the time is like, look, if all you care about is averages, you'll never be anything other than an average marketer. So you have to have courage to kind of do your own thing a little bit and own it.
I love that. And one of the things that I teach is, because I do a lot of marketing research, I talk about actually interviewing extreme users. So it's not, because we tend to go for survey data where you miss all the extreme users. It's, the super users and the non-users. So I love that you brought that up. And I also like that you kind of created a segue for me in talking about empathy, because I do want to dig into Hug Your Haters a little bit. I think one, it's probably my favorite title of a marketing book over the last couple of years. And I want to ask you just if you could give us a brief overview of the philosophy behind Hug Your Haters. We'll start there.
So Hug Your Haters is a book that really says that customer service is the new marketing. That the big move on the chessboard is that today, most of our customer interactions take place in public rather than in private. And when your customer interactions take place in public, the economic ramifications of those interactions is magnified extraordinarily. If you're just going to have a one-on-one phone call or a one-on-one email exchange with a customer, if you disappoint that customer, it's like, well, that's unfortunate, but what's the amplification there? Not much. However, if you're interacting with a customer on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Yelp, TripAdvisor, all these other places, the number of spectators looking on can be thousands. And the economic impact of those thousands of spectators is huge. So you can drive real business based on how you handle your customer interactions, not to mention the fact your unhappy customers are your most important customers, right? The people who actually take the time to tell you what you can do better are doing you a tremendous favor. And in most businesses, even despite writing the book and talking about this all over the world for 2 years, in most businesses, negativity is tolerated. In great businesses, negativity is embraced. And that's a huge difference.
Right. And I came up through the Disney ranks. So we were, guest service recovery was kind of drilled into our heads, which I think is one reason why this book's so attractive to me. But then I'm also a citizen of all these online environments, Facebook and Twitter. And I realize how nasty customers can be. So is it worth responding to like the nastiest customers, the ones
Yes.
who are profanity laden and really kind of putting it to us?
My rule is you reply to everybody, that you reply to every customer in every channel every time. That's the hug your haters approach. Every customer, every channel, every time. Now, what happens in day-to-day practice is people say, well, that customer is just a troll. We shouldn't waste time answering them. Well, here's the thing, though. You don't know somebody as a troll until the second reply, right? They could just be outlandish, right? You don't know that they have sort of negative intent. You don't know that they're malicious until the second reply. So our approach is you answer everybody and then you see what happens. And the reason you do that is that even if somebody is outlandish or using profanity, etc., when you reply, it shows again to all the spectators that you're not making distinctions, that you are listening all the time, that every customer or potential customer has value. Now, obviously, you handle different people differently based on the tenor and tone of that exchange, but we believe the best practice is to answer everybody. It also, in the front lines in bigger companies, eliminates the need for a frontline responder to say, how, as an individual, make a decision, how outrageous is too outrageous for this business to reply. Right. That's a judgment call that you're better off not making, in my estimation. You're better off saying, let's just answer everybody. And that way, there's no question about it.
And how do you feel about using humor in the responses? Because I've seen some brands do this really well with the negative kind of trolling inquiries.
It can work extraordinarily well. I always feel like humor is dangerous because not everybody has the same sense of humor. But there are certainly circumstances where it can work. I would absolutely test it before you embrace it as a day-to-day, hour-to-hour response mechanism. But it can absolutely work. But you got to have the right people on the keyboard to do that for sure.
Okay. Yeah. And I think Wendy's is maybe the first brand that I saw doing this, kind of responding to the really nasty people with humor, and then their humorous reply would get amplified. And I thought that was pretty cool. But maybe it's brand dependent. I'm actually
on record. I've written several articles about that Wendy's Twitter account, and one in Adweek in particular, where I said I don't really like it. The reason I don't like what Wendy's does on Twitter is that they don't have that same brand tone anywhere else. Right. So Wendy's is not snarky on Facebook. Wendy's is not snarky on Instagram. Wendy's is not snarky in the restaurant at all. Wendy's is not snarky on television or radio or outdoor or direct mail. On Twitter, however, they're massively snarky. And so in a vacuum, I get it. And it works in that vacuum. And I guess from one perspective, when we tell clients, hey, don't treat every social network the same, they are certainly following that advice. But it feels incongruent to me in terms of their brand values. And that's the part that I don't get. Like, I don't think Wendy's equals snark, but it certainly does on Twitter. And so that's my problem with that particular program. Like, I love how they've executed it, but from a brand perspective, it just doesn't hang together for me.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And one of the classes I teach is called Integrated Marketing Programs. And the whole idea is that you have this consistency of messaging across platforms and that everyone's talking to each other. And Wendy's feels like they have this rogue social media manager who's focused on Twitter that doesn't really align. So I think that's
like if you go to a different business like a Joe's Crab Shack or some of those other kind of places, you know what I mean, where they sort of intentionally treat you poorly and that's kind of their shtick. Yeah. Like that would totally make sense to me. But when I walk into Wendy's, and I was just there last week and I got like a chicken sandwich, nobody was like, yeah, you suck, chicken sandwich. Like nobody's like giving me shit for having a chicken sandwich, right? So it just felt a little weird to me.
Yeah, I get it. So one thing that you said, which I'm thinking about big brands here, but when you say respond to everyone who reaches out to you on social media, I'm thinking about some brands that actually do that, and it feels so impersonal. It's like if you reach out to some airlines, they'll tweet you back and say, like, please send us a direct message with this code in it or something. So you feel like you're just getting this automated response. Yeah,
some of it's tricky from a privacy perspective, right? You don't want to air somebody's account number in public. But some of it is also very perfunctory and very copy and paste. You absolutely nailed it. There's a difference between efficiency and sort of being rote, and that line is very difficult to stride at scale. And you see some businesses saying, well, we've got to take this offline. We got to take this to a direct message. So let's just reply with everybody like, send us a direct message, send us a direct message. That doesn't feel very psychologically satisfying, right? It's not empathetic, but by the same token, they do have to take it in private. Now, our advice is, as a consultancy, that Scott, you never channel shift on the first reply. So I was doing a project recently, an analysis, and I was looking at a famous donut company. And there's not that many, so you can probably figure out which one it might be. But one of their customers posted this photo of a box of donuts on their Facebook page, and the donuts were kind of messed up. They'd been run over by a car. It was not a great display. And the customer said something to the effect of, I expect more from you. This is not what these donuts are supposed to look like. Somebody who manages their Facebook page answered, well, you're right. That's terrible. Call our customer service department at 800, blah, 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 blah. Customer answers back, well, why can't we handle this on Facebook since I'm already on Facebook? And also, if you're not the customer service department, who are you?
Right.
So this idea of like, okay, we've got different departments. We have a department that manages Facebook and a customer service, quote unquote, department. And customer service likes to address people via phone. So you have to use the phone to talk to customer service. And fundamentally, one of the big themes in the book, Scott, is that we have to interact with customers in the venues that they prefer, not the venues that the business prefers. And that requires some operational changes that not everybody's prepared to do yet.
Right. So it's because your social media manager might not be equipped to handle the customer complaints. So do you bring someone else in from customer service to actually provide
absolutely.
the answer?
Yeah. Or you build something in the back office that says, all right, we're not going to respond to this customer instantaneously, but we're going to pass the message to customer service. We're going to get their response and then come back and post it. And so maybe we respond in an hour instead of 5 minutes, but at least we have an answer as opposed to call.
Okay. That makes sense.
Because if they wanted to call, they would have already called. Like this customer chose Facebook. Like there's this, it drives me crazy. It's like companies seem to think that customers are sitting there and playing like contact mechanism roulette, right? They're just like, Twitter, right? It's not like that, right? The channel that they chose is the channel that they chose. Right. It's not random. It's not an accident. It's where they are most comfortable. And we have to respect that choice.
And that makes perfect sense. And that response is unsatisfying, not just to that customer, but to everyone else who's watching.
Yeah, they're just kicking the can down the curb. Like they're just passing the buck and saying it's somebody else's responsibility. At least they apologize, right? So there's that. But it just takes more time, right? Now the customer's got to say, I've tried this once, now I got to do it again. One of the things that we talked about in the book is we found that a lot of people who use social media for customer service have already tried phone and email, and either could not get a speedy response or could not get a response that they liked. And so now they go to social media as like the Hail Mary pass, like, okay, now I'm taking it public, baby. And so we have to understand that if you say to somebody, hey, call us, chances are they may have already called you. So to say, call us, they're like, bro, I just tried to call you, but I was on hold forever. That's why I came to Twitter. And now you're telling me to call again. Like, what is going on?
That's a great point. And that, even personally, that's kind of how I operate with airlines. It's like I'll try to talk to the desk agent, and then I'll try to call them, and then it's like Twitter is my last resort, so that maybe they'll fear some public shaming or something like that, and finally
and sometimes you get better results, right? And that's the thing. Like everybody either has experienced personally or knows a story of a customer who got better results once they complained in public, right? It's a very common circumstance. So what happens? We are training people to use social media, because every time a customer gets a better outcome in social than they get on the phone or email, the next time they have a problem, they're not going to be like, well, let me go use the phone again. They're going right to Twitter next time. Exactly. And so businesses are sort of over time retraining their customers to use social media, but yet they don't necessarily, and some companies are great at this, but some are not. They're not necessarily prepared for that shift to happen, right? They still have tons and tons of phone agents and not very many social media agents, or vice versa. It just, over time, everything is changing. And look, I mentioned this a lot on stage. Your students don't use the phone.
Exactly.
They don't want to use the phone. right? I mean, I've got a daughter in college, and the phone is like last resort. I mean, that is the 37th most popular contact mechanism on her iPhone. Like the actual, she had to go to, when she went to school last fall, she had to do like a physical or whatever before she went to the university. And she's, 18, 19. So it's like, HIPAA law, she's got to do all her own healthcare stuff. So she says to me, and I swear this is true, I have to call the doctor to get a physical. What do I do? And I was like, man, we are screwed as a society. I was like, okay, well, like, physically how this works, right? She's like, yeah, I understand like the mechanics of the phone. Like everybody has a number. Like I get that part, but I don't know what to say. And I was like, holy cow. I said, well, here's what you do. You say, hi, I'm Monica Baer. I'm going to college in a couple of months. I need to get a physical. Can I make an appointment?
Right.
She says, oh, is that all there is to it? And I'm like, did you think there was a series of physical challenges? Like, it's unbelievable. So that's not going to change. Like, I really believe that today's high school students, university students, et cetera, I don't think they're going to get their first job or their first internship and be like, oh, wow, I've really been missing out on the joys of telephonic communication.
Right.
Now that I'm 23, I need to embrace this, synchronous project here. It's not going to happen, right? So yet, almost every business, other than new startups, are totally set up inside their operations to handle phone first, email second, and then wait a while, and then social or something else, right? And they're just not ready yet for that to change, and it's going to change.
Yes. Yeah. And so if I am starting up a business or I work for a relatively small company, one of the things that could seem overwhelming is, there's this pressure to be in 10 channels. So do you kind of pick one channel and then branch off from there, or what's the best strategy?
I think it depends on whether you're looking at it from a marketing or a customer service standpoint. Let me say this a couple ways. One, it's really, really hard to be good at everything in social, and you probably shouldn't try. As a small business, you should figure out which social channels allow you to sort of display what it is that you're good at in a way that's visceral and important and interesting. And B, especially as a small business, what you like. Like if you really like pictures, you should be on Instagram. Because if you don't like pictures, you're going to not be good at Instagram, right? If you don't love social media, you suck at social media, period. That's it. Like nobody who's like, I'm not really into it is great at it. Nobody in the whole world. So find what you personally like and then go there and you'll just be better at it. But the other thing I will tell you, and this happens a lot even with big businesses, every channel that you're on is potentially a customer service channel, whether you think it is or not. Somebody can complain on your LinkedIn page. We're seeing more and more customer interactions on Instagram, which didn't used to happen. Right. Somebody can reach out to you on Snapchat with a direct message. So if you're there for marketing, you're also there for customer service, whether you think you are or not. And so you just have to understand that.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. And so if you're not on Snapchat yet for marketing, then you have to keep that in mind, right? That it now becomes a customer service channel.
I mean, look,
as well.
if your target audience are Americans 14 to 29, you should definitely be on Snapchat. Definitely. Yeah. Right. But if that's not your target audience, well, then I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Right. Yep. That makes perfect sense. The circling back a little bit to hug your haters, one phenomenon which I'm sure you've observed and talked about is this piling on effect on social media. So now when a brand has some perceived transgression, it's politically incorrect tweet, or they really screw up the language of the tweet or something like that, or the imagery's off, then there's this effect where, it's picked up by all these media outlets and everyone kind of piles on them. Have you looked at this at all? Like, how should a brand respond once that happens? Or is there something we should do in advance to prepare for when this inevitably might happen?
Yeah, I actually talked about that a fair bit in my very first book, The Now Revolution, which has been a few years ago, but it still holds true today. You should always plan for that scenario, right? A social media crisis response plan should be mandatory for every business, because you don't know when your time's going to come up, and it probably will come eventually. And one of the things you need to do there is how do you reach your CEO if he or she is on a fishing trip out of the country if you need to make a statement? Right. You need to have a dark web page that is sort of your holder for any information necessary to put out in the public if you have some sort of crisis scenario. You need to know where you're going to direct people and how you're going to direct them. So you got to model this out inside your organization a little bit. But the most important thing is not even the mechanics of it. is that if you screwed up, you got to cop to it. I wrote a post for Forbes called "The Apology Allergy," and I think it's really true today that even when companies are clearly in the wrong, the leadership either says nothing or has this very like half-hearted, couched apology, either because the lawyers don't want them to actually say they're sorry or what have you. And it's just very unsatisfying. So you can nip a lot of this in the bud if you just say, yeah, we screwed up, we're working on it. Right. But people don't ever want to say that, which makes no sense to me.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And often there's this ripple effect where it's the initial transgression and then the unsatisfactory apology,
right.
and sometimes that gets more of a pile on than the
I mean, United Airlines is the best example of that in recent times, right? Where they drug the guy off the plane and everything else. And now that was also a bogus deal, right? Because that was actually not even them; that was their commuter carrier, which is a totally different company. Right. They're just using their logo, so to some degree, it wasn't even the right organization to complain about. But be that as it may, first apology was not a non-apology. Second apology was terrible. Third apology was 5% better. It wasn't until the fourth apology that people were like, okay, now they seem sorry. And so at that point, right? Yeah, you're just throwing gas on a fire of your own creation, and there's no excuse for that, right? That's just stupid.
Right. What do you think from the other side? What's the psychological motivation of consumers? So even a brand I don't buy from, if I see them being attacked on social media, then I feel like I need to get involved.
Yeah, right. I don't even know what these guys sell, but damn them.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big question, and there's a lot behind that, I think. So a little bit outside my area of research, but I'll take this the best I can. There's no question that consumers, at least in the United States, which is where I do most of my work, have less trust in companies and institutions than they have maybe ever. And so they're already coming at it from a bias, which is these guys are trying to screw us somehow.
Right.
And so when they see some sort of evidence of that, like, I told you, right? And so then that kind of creates this snowball effect. Also, we have gotten to this place where everybody's media sources are very balkanized. So you typically read the websites, the social media accounts of people that you agree with. And you don't read the websites or social media accounts of people that you don't agree with. Absolutely. And so if somebody that you are associated with because they believe some of the things that you believe, whether that's politically, religiously, whatever, maybe it's hobbies, they're vegan and you're vegan or whatever, right? Your tribe. If somebody in your tribe says this is a thing, then whether or not you have personal experience with it, you're like, the tribe has spoken. All of us must attack the invader. And so it becomes this almost groupthink scenario. And it happens so fast in social media that just like just a light switch, all of a sudden it's a huge thing. So it's difficult for brands. The third component of that, and there's been a bunch of research on this, not from me, but from others, that shows how often people pass things along in social media, but never actually read it or click on it, right? So they're just like, okay, I saw the tweet, it must be true. I'm going to forward it, retweet it. Same thing in Facebook with shares. And they never actually even click, much less, click it, read it, and then assess whether or not it's true. So it's not a particularly healthy scenario for society, in my estimation, but I don't see that genie going back in the bottle either.
Right. And I think you nailed it, but it's something that I want to study, which is why I asked you about it.
Yeah, I'd love for you to do it. I think it'd be fascinating.
And I think it is rooted in some need for affiliation with your tribe. So I really think you hit the nail on the head, but we'll kind of leave it up to empirics to find out whether that's true or not.
Sort of a mob mentality, which becomes psychologically attractive somehow.
Right, exactly. And then whether it actually changes the perspective of the brand and how they respond. And, there's kind of this whole ecosystem around a shaming event, which I think is pretty fascinating. And I'm going to be mindful of your time here, but I want to get into your next book a little bit. Yeah. So could you kind of tease that for us, and then maybe it'll be my.
I wish I had like a cover to hold up, but we're not quite there yet. Like days away. The new book is called Talk Triggers: The Complete Manual for Creating Customers with Word of Mouth, and it's all about how same as lame. And the companies that do something that stand out create customer conversations, which brings them disproportionate numbers of new customers at very little additional cost. There's been a lot of great books on word of mouth over the years. This one is interesting in my estimation because it has a very specific framework for how to create a talk trigger inside your organization, a 6-step process for how to find them, test them, measure them, evaluate them, etc. Tons and tons and tons of case studies from all kinds of businesses, small, medium, large, B2B, B2C. So I wrote it with my good friend Daniel Lemon, and so it'll be out October 2nd officially. Yeah.
And so just kind of spinning off the big idea that you're covering there, does it make, if you're trying to stand out, then we see more brands now taking a political position. Is that something that you recommend?
Well, let me say it this way. In the parlance of the book, a talk trigger is not necessarily marketing. It's an operational choice that creates marketing. So if you think of a company like Patagonia has a very distinct political bent that gains them a lot of customers and also loses them some customers. But obviously they've done the calculus on that and have decided it's worth it. For us in our book, we wouldn't consider that to be a talk trigger because it's not a thing that exists. It's not an operational choice that they have made. I guess it is a choice, but it's not an operational choice.
Got it.
It's sort of a tonality choice. So partially. A better example for the book would be look at DoubleTree hotels, right? So every time you go to a DoubleTree, they give you a chocolate chip cookie. Every hotel, every time, they make millions and millions and millions of cookies every single year. Everybody knows that is their thing, and everybody talks about it. So much so that I did a research project. We talked to 500 people who have stayed at a DoubleTree hotel in the last 90 days. And we said, how many of you have, since you were there 90 days or less ago, proactively, without being aided, mentioned the chocolate chip cookie to somebody else?
Right.
34%.
Wow. Okay.
Now, that's 34% of how many people stay at a DoubleTree hotel every 90 days? Like hundreds of thousands? I mean, a lot of people, right? So the word of mouth value of those conversations is extraordinary, right? It's huge. And the key here is that the cookie is a story. We like the hotel is not a story. And this is where we sort of get into this interesting dynamic between customer experience and word of mouth. Good is an amazing thing to be in customer experience. Good is a 4-letter word in word of mouth.
Right.
Because you don't want your customers to say it's a good hotel. Why? Because that's a crap story.
Yep. Right.
Nobody ever says, Scott, check this out. Check this out. I want to tell you about this perfectly adequate experience I just had.
Right.
Right? Nobody says that, right?
Yep.
Nobody ever says that. So you have to do something different and specific enough that people notice it. Here's my favorite example from the book, small business. In Sacramento, there is a business called Skip's Kitchen, and it's a family-owned small burger restaurant, counter service. You walk in, you order your burgers, they bring you your food to your table. Here's their talk trigger. Here's the operational decision they made to be different, to create conversation. You place your order, whether it's just you and your wife, 10 people, doesn't matter. You place your whole order. Then from underneath the counter, they pull out a deck of cards and they fan all the cards out in front of you face down. They say, pick a card. You pick a card. If you get the Joker, your entire meal is free.
Okay.
That's their deal, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
And so they have spent $0 on advertising in 9 years. They just got named the number 29 best hamburger restaurant in America.
Wow.
And the reason it works for them is that they give away about 3.5 free meals on average per day. But those 3.5 people, when they win, go batshit crazy, right? They're like selfies and like pictures and telling everybody, and it's on Yelp and TripAdvisor. And it's like this whole thing, and everybody's like clapping, and right, it becomes this self-perpetuating word of mouth engine that brings people to their door. Now, do they have good burgers? Yes, very good burgers. But would they have the same business if they didn't have the Joker? I say no, because good is just a prerequisite to be in business.
Right.
Right. Yep. Good doesn't create conversation. Not really. So that's what the book is all about.
And I can just imagine how crazy people go if they ever get 2 jokers in a row or something, something like that would just.
Okay. So you, as a researcher, you're going to love this. Okay. So this is the part that was even crazier. So there's only 52 decks in 53 because one joker, 53 cards in a deck. All right. They have only 9 tables in the restaurant, small place. So the other thing they do is when you pick the card, if it's not the joker, that becomes the thing that they bring your food out to. So they keep the card, you put it on a little stanchion on your table. So Scott, you're the 8 of clubs. So they bring out 2 patty, 8 of clubs, 2 patty melts. That's you, right? So at any point in time, potentially 9 cards of the deck could be on the tables, right? Being used as an identifier. Well, cagey customers who have done this before will come to the restaurant. They'll see that not all the tables will fill. They'll get in line, and then they'll continue to let people cut in line, so that when they come to the counter, their odds are better. Right. Their odds are 1 in 44 instead of 1 in 53, or 1 in 44 instead of 1 in 48. I'm like, man, those people have too much time. Was my assessment, but I love that people thought about that.
Right. That's awesome. That's so cool. And this whole idea that you're kind of turning your customers into vivid storytellers, so that
volunteer marketers, what we call it.
Yeah, and then the next time I decide on what burger restaurant to go to, that is going to be a very accessible memory for me, right? So incredible.
Yep. It's been a really fun project to work on. We're starting to do some consulting around it too, and helping companies, find that one thing or create that one thing that builds conversation. And it's, here's the part that's crazy. So the most recent research that just came out said that word of mouth represents 19% of the American economy. Okay. It's like $6 trillion. In B2B, word of mouth is an influencing factor in 91% of all B2B purchases, right? So it has this extraordinary economic impact. It's like out of control, right? But here's the part that's crazy to me as a professional marketer. 19% of the economy. Less than 1% of all businesses have an actual word of mouth plan. Every business cares about word of mouth. Every business wants it, but we just take this laissez-faire approach to it. Like, well, I'm sure our customers talk about us. Well, why? Well, they do. Well, what do they say? Well, I'm sure they say we're a good restaurant. Like, we all want word of mouth, but nobody has an actual plan. It's unconscionable. There's no thing in the history of business that's more powerful, that is less built around an actual strategy than word of mouth. So we're going to try and fix that with this book, Talk Triggers.
Awesome. Well, that'll give me a good excuse for me to ask you to come back on the show next year then, so we can talk about the book.
Well, we'll do it in person. I've got some clients in Houston, so we'll do it face to face sometime. But come down and come to school.
That would be amazing. So I appreciate that. And I really appreciate your time. I want to give you an opportunity to tell us there are so many ways to follow you, but what are the best or the most valuable to you?
I'm not hard to find, which I guess is good news or bad news, but the best place to go is convinceandconvert.com. That's our home base. We have multiple articles every week on content marketing, social media marketing, digital marketing, etc. Also the home of our podcast network. My show is called Social Pros. It's a podcast where we interview social media managers from different companies every single week. We have another show called The Content Experience, which is similar for content marketing managers. So all kinds of great stuff at convinceandconvert.com. You can find me at jbaer.com as well. And of course, the books and all that stuff is available all the places and ways that books can be procured these days, including audiobook read by me.
Oh, nice. All right. That's so cool. And when your book comes out, I promise I'm going to buy it and I'm going to post a review of it, whether I like it or not. No, I'm sure I'll love it.
I think you're going to like it. I think it's our best work. I really do. You never know until it comes out. This is the hard part. A book's basically written. We got one more round of edits to do, and then you got to sit around for 7 months while the publisher, I don't know, like harvests trees or whatever they do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jay. This is so valuable for my students and everyone else who follows me. I really appreciate it.
Scott, thanks so much.
Have a good one. Thanks.
See ya.